Anastasia. So the arms of the Mother of God are depicted in the form of the symbolic sign of Allat, the same ancient symbol of spiritual fusion of the personality with the soul, enlightenment and cognition of the truth, and attainment of spiritual liberation. This symbol was known to the ancient peoples in different times in the form of the above-mentioned symbol, which resembles a bug, and also images of the ancient goddesses with raised hands. It's the same ancient symbol which was recorded by prehistoric people as a petroglyph, indicating that man can reach such a state of spiritual liberation only with the participation of the creating force of Allat. Rigdon. Absolutely. So then, the image of the Mother of God, Aranta, who is dressed in blue garments and stands on a quadrangular base, is positioned against a circle-shaped golden mosaic background. By the way, in an altered state of consciousness, of expanded spiritual perception, a person, while looking at the Mother of God, can see the effect of glowing green light radiating from her. Along the curve of the half-dome, over the arch of this unique niche, an inscription in Greek has been preserved from ascetics of Mount Athos for the future generations of Kievan Rus. Since God is in her midst, she will not be shaken. God will help her at the break of dawn. In the context of the story about Kievan Rus, I would like to draw your attention to another equally important page in history. Initially, in Kievan Rus, Archangel Gabriel and Virgin Mary were worshipped together, as it should be, and only much later, in the 15th century, people separated the honoring of Archangel Gabriel from the cult of Annunciation of the Holy Mother, although this is incorrect. Where the Virgin holily creates, the Holy Spirit is always with her. By the way, in the Slavic beliefs, before Christianity was adopted, the supreme male and female deity were honored together, using our language in the meaning of the spiritual symbol of the divine lotus, the plan, and the creating Allat, implementation of the plan. Anastasia. Yes, this can be traced back to the mythological characters of the Slavic sacred legends, which have been preserved since ancient times. Rigdon. Regarding Archangel Gabriel and the Virgin Mary, on the altar pillars of the main eastern arch of Sophia's Cathedral in Kiev, where the Mother of God, Aranta, is located, mosaic images of the Annunciation have still been preserved. Anastasia. Yes, on one pillar there is a picture of Archangel Gabriel with fingers of his right hand joined in the blessing sign. On the other pillar, there is the Mother of God with a spindle in her hand, spinning the spiritual thread of the human life. Rigdon. I would like to mention that in the Old Slavonic language, the word veritino, spindle, is linked to the word vertit, to spin, a vortex, spiral movement. By the way, the Slavs were not the only ones to have this word. The ancient Indian word vartanam also means spinning. Since ancient times, the spindle had been considered in the spiritual aspect to be a magic tool given from above. That is, speaking in modern terms, this is a symbolic description of the prayer, meditation, and spiritual practice. Spinning with yarn using the spindle was a certain spiritual symbol known to many peoples as the union of the earth and heaven, the union of a human during his fleeting life with the spiritual divine nature, the soul. The yarn in the religious art symbolized human spiritual life, and in the global meaning, it was a symbol of time, the connection of the past, the present, and the future. It was a spiritual component which united all pearls, souls. Many ancient peoples depicted the Great Mother with a spindle in her hands. Anastasia. Interestingly, scientists have ascribed the Great Mother to lunar goddesses, since she was usually portrayed by different peoples with a certain very ancient sign in the form of the moon's sickle, that is a crescent with horns pointing upwards, above which a circle was placed. Rigdon: Yes, man does not pay attention to many things until he knows. But as soon as real knowledge touches his brow and his soul awakens, he gains wisdom, and wisdom begets action. Anastasia: Those are golden words, the very truth itself. I think that for many readers, just like it was for us some time ago, it will be very interesting to find out about the active signs that were circulated in large numbers in Kievan Rus in that time. Could you tell us more about this important moment in history? Rigdon: Agapit of Pechersk partially let Yaroslav the Wise in on the secret of active signs. He told him in detail how and what particular main places of worship should be built in the capital and in the country, and most importantly, how and what signs to place on them, and also what had to be done to activate those signs in order to generate a spiritual surge in people and protect them from the influence of negative forces of the invisible world. Agapit, of course, was pursuing his own goals, laying the foundation of spiritual signs for future generations, as opposed to the fleeting human goals of Yaroslav. Still, people are people. Even if you warn them 10 times of the consequences, they still try to make adjustments from the mind to the knowledge given to them. Unfortunately, Yaroslav was no exception to the human race, at least in this respect. Knowing what effect the reverse swastika exerts on the masses, Yaroslav still gave an order to put the sign in the decoration of the cathedral to assert his earthly power. Yet what was the point? What did he achieve? His life flew like an arrow through the illusion of the material world, and the human weakness, thirst for gaining earthly power, after death of his physical body, just burdened him more and prolonged the agony of his torment as a subpersonality. The animal mind, however, is still enjoying this human mistake of his by activating generations of priests towards itself and creating a surge of negative energy in the masses of living people. It must be said that other than that, Yaroslav truly showed wisdom. Together with a team of like-minded people, he successfully finished this project, thanks to which, in a short space of time, Kievan Rus turned not only into a prosperous state, but also became the home of the Blessed Mother of God. At that time, mostly owing to the proper placement of positive signs and popularization of the universal cultural and moral values, the best spiritual qualities started to manifest themselves in people more and more. In the worldview of the Slavic people of that time, service to God's truth became synonymous with service to good, the supreme spiritual blessing, victory of God's grace. In fact, people found a common peaceful ground between their old beliefs and the new ones introduced by the previous politicians and priests. That is why, after the strife on religious grounds in that period of time, a positive surge occurred, such a spiritual unity of people on the territory of the old Russian state, which previously had not differed from other countries of those times, which were drowning in civil strife. So St. Sophia's Cathedral played a key role in this project. First of all, Sophia's Cathedral, built in Kiev, was copied, although not on the same scale, but with a similar design of the 5-navel crow's-domed temple in the cities of the old Russian state, which were important at that time. Veliki Novgorod, this city still exists in Russia, and also Polotsk. This city exists to this day and is located in the Vitebsk region of Belarus. Not only was the external design copied, but also the spiritual content, starting with placement of the main symbols and signs and the icon of the Mother of God, Aranta, and ending with creation of educational libraries and schools for those temples. In St. Sophia's Cathedral in Veliki Novgorod, they still place a figurine of a dove on the cross of the central dome of the temple as a symbol of the Holy Spirit. In the history of the travails of the temple in Polotsk, it is mentioned that in the 18th century there was even an attempt to remake the temple in the honor of the descent of the Holy Spirit. The dove is already a substitution by people for the older finial of the cross, the AllatRa sign, in the form of a crescent with its horns pointing upwards and a circle above. Previously, the dove was depicted with its wings spread out. When a person looked up at the cross of the cathedral, instead of the dove, he would see the sign that was visually created by the raised wings and the little head of the dove, in the form of a crescent with its horns pointing up and a circle. Secondly, the original of those copies, St. Sophia's Cathedral in Kiev, was built not on its own, but as part of a complex. The 4 city gates were built along the corners of the cathedral at the same distance from it, and they were also marked with signs. Although it would be more correct to say that they were the gates to the so-called Upper Town, which was located on the old Kiev mountain, now the central part of Kiev. Anastasia. So the 4 gates around St. Sophia's Cathedral in Kiev make a diagonal cross similarly to the 4 essences, where the cathedral itself is the center as the symbol of the soul. Rigden. Precisely. In the religious symbolism of Christianity, gates are entrances leading from the forechurch to the temple and from the temple to the altar. The main gate of the old Russian iconostasis in an Orthodox temple was located opposite to the throne in the altar and was called the Holy Gate in the meaning of spiritual and not political supremacy. Usually in its upper part, the Annunciation scene with Archangel Gabriel and the Virgin Mary was depicted, and the bottom part had 4 evangelists in pairs on the wings of the doors. So the opening of the Holy Gate at certain moments of the service symbolizes the opening of the kingdom of heaven, that is, an entrance, a passage to another, spiritual world. And this symbol did not appear without a reason. This energy process of the opening of a passage into another world really takes place during spiritual work, both individual and collective, of strong spiritual individuals, regardless of what religion they belong to and in which country they live. By the way, in ancient times, among the peoples of, for example, Kievan Rus, the opening of the gate of the city meant to let someone into the city. In case of enemies, it meant capture of the city or a wish of the city dwellers to lay down their weapons. If a chronicle mentioned the closing of the main gates before the enemy, that meant a decision of the residents to offer resistance. The main golden gate of the ancient Kiev became the southern gate facing Mount Athos, which is considered to be the abode of the Mother of God. To be more precise, geographically, it was located in the southwestern part of the city. On this main gate, Golden Gate of the city, a church was built in honor of Archangel Gabriel and the Mother of God, the Church of the Annunciation, in order to always give joy to that city with the Holy Annunciation and by a prayer of the Holy Mother of God and Archangel Gabriel. Anastasia. Yes, historical information about this was recorded in the Hyperion Codex. Even to this day, words have been preserved that can be found in the historical multi-volume collection, which tells about the literature of the ancient Rus, starting in the 11th century. The Library of the Literature of the Ancient Rus, Volume 1, page 50. If Archangel gives a kiss to the maiden, it will also be given to the city, saying to her, "Rejoice, the joyful one, God is with you," and to the city, "Rejoice, the blessed city, God is with you." Kiev has historically been under the patronage of the Mother of God and Archangel Gabriel. This is an obvious fact which today is kept quiet. That is why today on the coat of arms of Kiev, one can see Archangel Michael as the patron of the city, who is shown with an unsheathed sword as a symbol of the Kievan princes who waged wars, including among themselves, like so many in position of power at the time. Rigdon: well, what can you do with these statesmen? As in the ancient times, so it remains. Kings talk about little things as if they are great things, inciting rebellion onto themselves. But this is not important. The main thing is that people still keep alive the memory and honoring of Archangel Gabriel and Virgin Mary, regardless of the earthly wishes of today's princes. Anastasia: without a doubt, this spiritual memory of the peoples can be traced from generation to generation, and this cannot but bring joy. But let's get back to the conversation, which is so interesting from the historical perspective. So the Golden Gate in Kiev was a symbol of the city, which was equivalent to the front essence in the spiritual interpretation of the knowledge about a human. Therefore, the symbol of the city's past, that is, the back essence. Rigdon: and the first stone church of Kievan Rus, which was dedicated to the Blessed Virgin Mary, and which today is known in history as the Church of the Tithes, became the conditional northern gate. It was built ages ago by Prince Vladimir, Yaroslav's father. The entire old Grand Ducal court of Vladimir was located beside it. Generally, it should be mentioned that this place has a more ancient history in relation to pre-Christian places of worship. Anastasia: yes, judging by archaeological excavations, foundations of palaces and much older buildings were found there, which belonged to the pagan times of the Slavs, and also the remains of even more ancient place of worship, a pagan temple, in the form of a stone platform with 4 protrusions at the corners. In other words, even in more ancient times, the old Kiev mountain had already been an important religious center of the Slavic peoples who lived in this area. Rigdon: absolutely. So Yaroslav the Wise not only restored this church, but also consecrated it once again on the advice of Agapit, this time in the right way. The first church in Kievan Rus, which was dedicated to the Mother of God, symbolized the past that opened a way for the future, and it also played an important role in placement of signs in Kiev. The Western Gate, or as common people called it, Zhidovsky Gate, Jewish Gate, became the right essence for the ancient capital. Geographically, it was located in the northwestern part of the city. A few centuries later, when the city of Lviv was founded, the gate began to be called the Lviv Gate, since the road from Kiev to Lviv went through it. Today, Lvivska Square stands in that place in Kiev. It is interesting that over time, one can say nothing changed regarding the activation points which stimulate the animal nature in people. There was a market here in the olden days, and it remained. Only the name changed. It is trade center now. Even more, the incentive for hoarding and increasing material wealth in this city, just like in other major cities of the world, is once again blooming with weeds instead of really important and needed incentives for people, creating deeds from the fruit-bearing eternal tree, the spiritual nature. Anastasia: unfortunately, that is so. If we take a look at modern Kiev, the first thing that catches the eye is the large number of trade centers, banks, and other similar institutions, one richer than the other. One gets the impression that everybody is obsessed only with trade, instead of true spiritual and creative deeds, worthy of a civilized human society. Rigdon: such large cities of the world are a vivid example of the prevailing human choice. But I repeat, to improve the situation is in the hands of people themselves. So even at that time, Agapit suggested to Yaroslav that he reinforce this western gate with a spiritual and cultural object that has a sign which would balance the invisible forces to avoid tilting towards the animal nature of the people who visit this place. So a church dedicated to the presentation of the Lord, Sretение Господне, translator's note, was built here. This was symbolic. Firstly, the Old Slavic word Sretение meant meeting, and according to the Old Slavic beliefs, it meant a meeting of a human with the divine and its glorification. Secondly, the biblical story of the presentation was dedicated to the Mother of God, the Virgin Mary, who brought baby Christ to the temple on the 40th day following his birth. In Orthodoxy, presentation was celebrated a week before February 25th, and in the spiritual aspect, it was considered to be a renewal, a meeting of the old and the new. That is why it was very symbolic that the Western Gate in ancient Kiev was reinforced exactly with this spiritual and cultural object. If Sophia's Cathedral was the center, the Golden Gate was conditionally the front essence. The Church of the Mother of God, Church of the Tithes, was the back essence, and the Western Gate was the right essence. Then the Latski Gate symbolized the left essence of the ancient capital of Kievan Rus. It was located at the place where today the city's central square is situated, the Independence Square, popularly known as Maidan. Anastasia, you know, when I had heard this information from you for the first time, I was extremely surprised, thinking, that's interesting. Whose idea was it to move the capital's main square exactly to this place, deliberately emphasizing the left essence? Because as the capital square, this place gathers large crowds of people. Rigdon, perfectly true. It was done not by accident, but quite consciously, as they say from the mind, the animal one. Well, first things first. The area where the Independence Square is located in Kiev today was called Перевесище, that which outweighs, during the times of Agapit. There was a marsh there, and people called it Goat Swamp since olden times. So then, it is approximately there, in the southeastern part of the city, where nowadays Sofievskaya Street begins on Maidan, leading to the cathedral. Yaroslav the Wise had the eastern gate placed there, which opened the way from Kiev to the Pechersk Monastery, currently the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra, and also to the Pecheneg's land. In history, this gate received the name Latski Gate. The word Lad, when translated from the Old Slavonic language, means unclean, unlucky, and Lada means wasteland, weeds, thick bush, raw land. By the way, a few centuries later, after a long siege of the city, the armies of Batu Khan managed to break into Kiev exactly through the Latski gates. Regarding the place itself, it remained a wasteland until the 19th century, when Freemasons, doing their bit to destroy the spiritual heritage of the Slavs, initiated construction of the city council building, particularly in this unclean place. Anastasia, yeah, well, independence on Goat Swamp, to make the main square of such a city in such a place? Yes, Freemasons only look native to people, but they're alien in mind. Rigdon, that is why they block people's access to the knowledge. They do everything to make people uninterested in their real spiritual history. They poison people with their lies, hiding obvious facts from them. Just look at their symbols. There are swords, bows, and arrows, axes, shields, compasses, and lions everywhere, the Freemason symbols. If one just takes interest in history, one can trace an almost simultaneous destruction of even the smallest remnants of those iconic structures which had been built for people and activated with science, for example, in Kievan Rus during the times of Agapit. For instance, the conservation-restoration of St. Sophia's Cathedral in Kiev took place exactly in the 17th, 18th centuries, and it was surreptitiously rebuilt in Baroque style which is why the building significantly changed its external appearance, including its geometric and spatial image. Anastasia. Well, authors of historical literature diligently borrow one and the same phrase from each other that Baroque, in those days, was a fashionable style of the Renaissance of Western civilization. Rigdon. And Italy, Rome, was its center. Does this tell you anything? Anastasia. Oh, it says a lot. Just take the word Baroque alone. Rigdon. Indeed. The Italian word barocco is derived from the Portuguese parola barocca, meaning an imperfect pearl. In other words, a pearl with a flaw, a defect in a gem, a deformed pearl. This word is also present in the Latin language. Anastasia. Yes, taking into consideration that this style was connected with aristocratic circles and the church, it is not surprising that the word barocco was chosen for it as the name of a deformed pearl. Even more, later it was the dominant style in the European art up to the middle of the 18th century, especially in countries where Catholicism was prevalent. The Baroque is considered to be a triumphal procession of the Western civilization. Rigdon. Well, yes, a torchlight procession. As they say, whoever has ears, let them hear. It will not be difficult for clever people to understand why Sophia's Cathedral became the first architectural monument on Ukraine's territory, which was entered into the Worldwide Heritage List of UNESCO's, which means that rebuilding it, transferring it to a religious organization, or holding church service in it is prohibited. Anastasia. That means that the Freemasons from the Archons rebuilt the original and now, using their own plausible tool, UNESCO, impose conditions on the local residents that cathedral may not be rebuilt, and moreover, traditional Orthodox church services are not allowed in it? It's not allowed, so to say, to activate the pearl? Well, this cannot be called anything other than lawlessness. Rigdon. And this is perhaps the main spiritual pearl of Kievan Rus. And what have Freemasons done to other buildings in the same years? In the 18th century, they made attempts to rebuild Sophia's Cathedral in Veliki Novgorod to distort the geometric and spatial image under the pretext of reinforcing the walls of the building. The cathedral in Polotsk has been rebuilt anew. Furthermore, by the 18th century, Sophia's Cathedral in Polotsk was already significantly different from its original version, given how many times this building was first destroyed and then restored from the human mind for centuries to come. Even then, despite this circumstance, Freemasons played it safe, just in case, and erected a church with non-Slavic architecture in the Baroque style in its place at the beginning of the 18th century. Well, I'm not even talking about the four gates of Kiev. As soon as the Freemasons started sponsoring politicians in Kiev, the demolition and destruction of the remnants of significant architectural monuments began under various pretexts. An old and well-known method of Freemasons is to destroy the original first and then provide their own copy. Thus, today we can see only a poor copy of the Golden Gate and speculation about the Freemasons' copy of the Lotsky Gate monument, which was almost destroyed in the 19th century when the city council building was being built. There is a mere reference in the chronicles that there once was a Western Gate, and that the first stone church of the Mother of God stood in the city of Kiev. That is the whole story of how spiritual science helps some people develop themselves while they make others go mad. How some people create a spiritual pearl for the generations of the living, and how others try to apply their Baroque to it. Anastasia. Yes, the times and seasons of today's world. Rigdon. This is just an example from history, many likes of which can be found in the past centuries. The problem is not in buildings, the problems in people, and in the choices of humanity. Anastasia. By the way, getting back to the conversation about the peculiarities of architecture of the temples among the peoples of the world, using the main symbolism, including the pearl, just like the Christian temples have the altar part of the building shaped as a semicircular niche oriented to the east, so do the Muslim mosques have a special semicircle niche, mihrab. The Arabic word mihrab means the direction of the prayer. It is oriented towards the location of Mecca, the sacred city for the Muslims, located on the Arab Peninsula in Southwest Asia, where one of the main Muslim shrines is located, a structure in the form of a cube, Kaaba. So this niche is decorated with ornamental carving, painting, and incrustation. Its internal dome is often designed in the form of a shell, a symbol of storage of the precious spiritual pearl. Rigdon. That is right. Such a design is understandable because Muslims have a lot of legends about the pearl, and they distinguish it as one of the special symbols. For example, according to the Prophet Muhammad's saying, the world was created from the white pearl. According to Muslim beliefs, the Almighty created the white pearl, the thickness of which was 7 skies and 7 lands put together. When God called the pearl to him, it trembled from his call so much that it turned into flowing water. Out of all the creations that at some time of day or night, one way or another, interrupt their glorification of the Almighty, it alone, already being water, did not for a moment cease to glorify the Creator, constantly surging and foaming. That is why God gave it superiority over others, making it the source and the beginning of life of all living beings. So all the living beings were made of water. And in order to carry this precious water, the Almighty created the wind, air, having endowed it with an uncountable multitude of wings. That is why, as a rule, the sacred niche is filled with many symbols. It was associated with the Blessed Virgin, the pure soul. Earlier, inside the mihrab, a burning lamp was hung because the divine presence in the world, or in human, was likened to the light of the lamp. The lamp is in the glass, and the glass is like a pearl star. It is the symbol of the light in the world. Anastasia. Regarding symbols, it is also quite interesting to look at the composition of the prayer mat, namazlik, among the Turkic-speaking nations practicing Islam. In its nominally ornamental picture, it usually imitates the mihrab of this or that region. Rigdon. By the way, mainly all the same symbols and signs are present there that belong to the cultures and religions of many other peoples: octagons, hexagons, rhombuses, squares, diagonal crosses, and so on. Generally speaking, a shell with a pearl in the ancient times was a symbol of the soul, of the creating divine feminine principle. It was an attribute of many female deities and their names, symbolic of the sacred element of water. As I have mentioned before, the latter meant a habitat that was different from the earthly one and entirely different from the human understanding. However, every living thing was derived from it, was dependent on it, and needed it. The Bible mentions the words of Jesus Christ when he explains what the kingdom of heaven is like. Matthew chapter 13, verses 45-46. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls, who having found one of great value, went away, sold everything he owned, and bought it. Nacre, which has a rainbow effect, was considered the pearl's divine shell. By the way, in the East, the sacred spiritual meaning of the soul in the form of a pearl was also often described poetically through the image of a water drop on the lotus. The thing is that lotus leaves have a specific whitish wax coating. Since olden days, the unusual effect of the lotus has been known. When water, for example rainwater, gets on the lotus leaves, it beats up into spherical drops. In the sunlight, these droplets, shimmering with the iridescent color of nacre on the whitish coating, seem like precious pearls. Naturally, this effect could not go unnoticed by the Eastern poets, thanks to which their lyrical verses became a metaphor with a deep sacred meaning. From the eternal sky, raindrops suddenly fell on the lotus, and light moisture on the leaves became a pearl. The French name for pearl, perle, is derived from the Latin perula, meaning a speck. The latter, in turn, is derived from the word perium, meaning a sphere. The Slavic word perlmutter is borrowed from the German word perlmutter, where perle stands for a pearl and mater means mother. In Latin, mater pearlorum is the mother of pearl. The ancient Romans also called the pearl a margarita. This word was borrowed from the ancient Greek language. Margaron is nacre. It is from this word that female names associated with the epithet of the ancient goddesses of love, beauty, fertility, eternal spring, and life are derived. For example, the name Margarita, pearl, is derived from the epithets of the goddess Aphrodite, who, according to ancient Greek mythology, was born as a result of virgin conception and arose from the sea foam in a shell like a shining pearl. The name Marina, marine, is derived from the epithets shining and the mother of pearl of the ancient Roman goddess Venus. The Latin word veneris means love, which was identified with Aphrodite. One of her symbols was a female dove. That is why in early Christian art, which originated in the Roman Empire, there were images of the Virgin Mary with a shell above her head as a symbol of the one who brought the divine pearl. It should be noted that the name Maria in the Roman Empire was associated with the concept which was traditional for the peoples living there, of the goddess of love, the glowing one, and mother of pearl, but not sad, rejected, and certainly not bitterness, as her name was later presented by the Jewish priests for the public. Anastasia. That's how they do it. Rigdon. They do it only because people themselves do not want to know more than what priests have specified for them. And this is the result. But suffice it to take a look at similar sacred symbols and designations among other peoples of the world, the access to the knowledge of which is deliberately being limited in the believer's mind with the word pagans, infidels, and so on, and everything will fall into place. Anastasia. Well, yes. From whom did the priests copy popular ancient symbols, signs, and attributes of divine characters? From other peoples.